Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. So what we have here today is my Phalaenopsis Kaoda Twinkle. So it's a Schilleriana cross, and I have put the parentage at the bottom of the video here, so you can have a look as a reference point. Kaoda Twinkle Chocolate Drop is, I think, considered a common orchid. I mean, at least I've seen this orchid being sold at different outlets multiple times. And it wasn't until maybe two and a half years ago that I purchased this orchid. And it has been a really interesting and positive experience. Anyway, if we go back in time, end of 2019 was when it first started to put out the new flower spike. And then toward the end of January 2020 was when the spike was long enough for me to utilize a stick to somehow prop up the flower spike. This year, what I did differently with this orchid was I wanted to train the flower spike so that it would have a better display. Last year's display was okay, but it just kind of had that. It just took up too much horizontal space than my liking. So this year, I wanted to train the flower spike to allow it to grow upwards first. And then flower spikes typically will then have natural pendant or bend somewhat after the buds are big enough, heavy enough, and then it would have that natural tendency to still lean toward the light source eventually. So this orchid this year produced a lot more flowers than last year, and to be honest with you, I did not do any special care for this orchid. It's just my typical Phalaenopsis orchid care, and that really means, in terms of water amount, this one gets 1/8 of a cup, and then fertilizer is quarter strength fertilizer. Nothing special, and this orchid is not fussy. Pretty hardy, I would even say. And the only thing that kind of worried me was the way that the buds looked when they were maturing. There were so many wrinkles on these buds. I thought that they were having bud blast, but thankfully they continued to get bigger and bigger. So I realized that okay, they were still growing. They weren't blasting. But just by looking at the buds, I was a little bit disappointed. Because I did not remember this orchid, would have wrinkly buds like this. I didn't think I see this last year. And then when the flowers opened, they look curlier than I remember, because the Kaoda Twinkles that I've seen, they have pretty extended flowers. The flower petal and sepals are pretty flat and extended. But my one, these ones, for this orchid anyway, this time around, their flowers are a little curly. I'm not sure if you can see that from the video here. They're a little curlier. And another interesting thing is that this orchid didn't bloom in the order that the buds were growing. It started with later buds and then eventually bloom out completely. This orchid did not have any bud blast, so that was a good thing. But the order in which the flowers started to open was a little puzzling to me. And then it has this curly flower, so I don't know if it's something I did that caused any of these, or it's just one of the characteristics that this orchid possesses. Anything that I do with this orchid is, like I said, typical Phalaenopsis orchid care. It doesn't strike me as a Phalaenopsis that would require too much sunlight, because I have this orchid on the bottom shelf of my growing rack. And yes, I do have some grow lights installed, but I don't usually open it or turn on the light until the evening time when I get home, and it's only for maybe 2 hours or 3, and then I would turn it off because I'm getting ready for my evening, getting ready for bedtime. So it doesn't really get that much additional light exposure, and during the day, because it's on the very bottom shelf, it doesn't get that much direct sunlight either. So I would say this one is a really hardy orchid, and just look at the color. That reddish burgundy color is just very, very interesting. And on top of that, it's fragrant. It's really sweet scent, and it doesn't smell like Schilleriana, so I don't know, maybe the smell comes from the other parent. And this, you may find this interesting. When I first purchased this orchid, it did not have any fragrance. I even went online to study about this cross, and I learned that this cross is fragrant. And then for about a year, I was calling this orchid being a defected Kaoda Twinkle because it's not fragrant, and I was even saying maybe that's why this orchid ended up in a grocery store because it's not fragrant. But that's not correct. I was wrong. This orchid rebloomed with fragrance, and this year it's also no exception. It also has very pleasant fragrance. And it's really strong in the morning, and then it starts to the smell, the fragrance would start to dissipate in a little bit in the afternoon time. Overall, I really enjoyed looking at this orchid. I actually put this orchid on top of my mantle after it was in full bloom, and I was looking at this orchid every day, and it brings me joy every day. The flower, if you have a Kaoda Twinkle, or if you ever see one, you can try to touch the flower. It's actually very substantial. It's thick, and it's very it has that very meaty feel to it. It's almost like you're touching like a leaf of a succulent plant, like it's really thick leaf. And I mean, it's just the flowers are not flimsy at all. I mean, what's best about this orchid is that, like I said, low maintenance, and then it's a reliable bloomer. The only thing that I wish this orchid would do is, should have some markings from Schilleriana. That would have been so wonderful. This orchid is still in its original container and media. The media is a mixture of bark chips and sphagnum moss. It has been in this container for maybe 2 years now, so I think it's time for a repot. Another reason I think I want to repot this orchid is because as it grew more leaves, you can tell that it's already getting a little tall. The stem is getting longer, so I kind of want to see if there's anything I need to trim off in terms of dead roots, in terms of just dry stems at the bottom or inside the media. But other than that, this orchid really requires very low maintenance, and there's some roots growing out of the pot and then reaching the bottom of the outer cup. So sometimes I even just make sure that there is some water standing at the bottom of the cup, and then that way, I know this orchid is gonna get some water somehow. There's some aerial roots also, so I think it's time for a repot. What do you think? Do you think I should repot this orchid this year, or should I wait until another year, or wait until it's underperforming to make that correction? Please let me know what you think in terms of whether I should repot this orchid this year or wait for another year to see how it does. Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below and let me know. Cast your vote. I would appreciate your opinion. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!